Welcome back to Real Spirit Horror Stories, where we dive deep into the darkest corners of the unknown. These are real, spine-chilling stories of supernatural encounters sent in by people just like you. So sit back, turn off the lights, and listen closely, because tonight's story is one that will leave you questioning what really hides in the shadows. It was 1985 when my family had experienced something so dark, so terrifying, that we still talk about it to this day. My uncle had just landed a job as a night security officer at a small college, nestled in a quiet, almost desolate area. The place looked ordinary during the day, old brick buildings surrounded by thick, towering trees, but at night, it transformed into something else entirely. My uncle was young, barely in his 20s and easily spooked, so my grandfather often accompanied him during those late night shifts. From the moment they stepped foot on campus, my grandfather felt it, the oppressive feeling, like the very air was watching them. He would tell my uncle, "Something's wrong with this place. It's too quiet, too still." But my uncle brushed it off, chalking it up to an overreactive imagination or the effects of the freezing, bone-chilling cold that seemed to sweep into every corner of the campus. But there was a reason for that unease. Something had happened at that college decades earlier, something the local townsfolk refused to talk about. In the 1920s, a fire had swept through the old dormitory, trapping students inside. It was a horrific event, one that claimed the lives of nearly a dozen young men and women. Legend has it that those who perished in the blaze didn't rest easy. There were stories, whispers, really, that the student spirits roamed the campus, angry, vengeful, looking for anyone who dared trespass on their domain. Of course, my uncle didn't believe any of that. Not at first. One night, during a particularly bitter winter storm, my uncle came down with the flu. His fever spiked, and he was too weak to go to work. And not wanting him to lose his job, my grandfather offered to cover the shift. He had done it before, but this night was different. The wind howled through the trees like a distant scream, and the snow fell so heavily that it was hard to see more than a few feet in front of you. As he started his rounds, the silence was unnerving. The building loomed in the darkness, casting long, twisted shadows. He walked through the main corridor of the administration building, his flashlight flickering against the peeling walls. That's when he heard it. Soft, almost imperceptible at first, whispering, faint voices echoing down the empty hall. He paused, shining his flashlight down the corridor. "Is someone there?" he called out, but there was no answer. The whispers continued just on the edge of hearing, as though they were coming from all around him. As the night dragged on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. He could hear footsteps, quick and light, like someone was running through the halls. Yet every time he turned a corner, there was no one there. His heart raced, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Something wasn't right. The air had felt heavy, like it was closing in on him. His footsteps echoed unnaturally loud in the empty space, but they weren't the only footsteps. He could hear another set, following him, always just behind, but never quite close enough to see. It was around 2:30 a.m. when the real terror had begun. He was patrolling the East Wing, the oldest part of the college, a place that hadn't been renovated in years. The walls were cracked and the windows rattled in the wind. He had just finished checking the lecture halls where he heard a loud bang from upstairs. It was the sound of running footsteps pounding up the stairwell. He froze, every instinct telling him not to go, but duty overrode the fear, and he slowly made his way towards the stairs. As he ascended, the temperature seemed to drop even further. His breath hung in the air, like mist. The footsteps were louder now, faster, racing up ahead of him. He gripped his flashlight tightly, his knuckles turning white. When he reached the top of the stairs, his flashlight flickered and died out. The darkness swallowed him, thick and suffocating. He fumbled with the light, smacking it against his palm until it came back to life, casting an eerie, weak glow. He followed the footsteps down the hall, each one louder than the last, until they stopped at a door leading to the roof. The door creaked open slightly, as though inviting him in. He hesitated, his hands trembling as he reached for the handle. Pushing the door open, he stepped out into the freezing night air. The wind howled, whipping at his coat, but the roof was empty. No one was there. He swept his flashlight across the space, searching for any sign of life, but found nothing. Then, the door slammed shut behind him, like a deafening bang. He spun around, his heart hammering in his chest, but the door wouldn't budge. He was locked out. And that's when he heard it, a soft, slow clapping. It started from the ground below, echoing through the night. He looked over the edge of the building, expecting to see someone standing there, but there was none. The clapping grew louder, more insistent, joined by the faint, mocking laughter. He backed away from the edge, panic clawing at his chest. Suddenly, a whisper, cold and breathy, brushed against his ear. "You're not alone." He whipped around, his flashlight flickering wildly, but no one was there. And then, without a warning, something shoved him hard. He stumbled, his feet slipping on the icy roof, and before he could regain his balance, he was falling. The wind rushed past him as he plummeted 3 stories, crashing into the snow-covered grounds below. When they found him the next morning, he was barely conscious, his body battered and broken, but that wasn't the worst of it. Imprinted on his back, stark against his pale skin, was a handprint, a bright red handprint, like someone had grabbed him and pushed him off the roof. The paramedics rushed him to the hospital, and on the way there, he whispered to the EMTs about what had happened. "There was someone there with me," he said. His voice was weak. "I felt them. They had pushed me." When my uncle visited him in the hospital, my grandfather told him everything. He warned him, begged him not to go back to that place. It's not safe there. There's something there, something evil. But my uncle, stubborn as always, didn't listen. He returned to work the next week. And that's when the nightmares started. He would wake up in a cold sweat, the sound of footsteps echoing in his ears. Always just out of sight. Sometimes he would see things. Dark figures moving through the halls, whispers in the empty rooms, and late at night, when he was alone in the security office, he would feel a presence behind him, watching, waiting. One night, he stayed late, finishing some paperwork in the dimly lit office. The clock ticked past 3 a.m., and the campus was deathly silent. As he typed away, he heard it again. Those same footsteps, slow and deliberate, walking down the hall towards him. His heart raced, his palms sweaty as he turned to look at the door. It was closed, but the footsteps stopped right outside. Then, the door had creaked open. Standing in the doorway was a shadowy figure, tall and loomy, its face hidden in darkness. For a moment, they stared at each other, the air thick with tension. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, the figure had vanished, leaving my uncle shaken to his core. That was when he began to see the silhouette. Every night, as he patrolled the campus, he would catch a glimpse of it. A dark, shadowy figure, always just ahead of him, disappearing around corners, watching him from windows. At first, he thought it was his mind playing tricks on him, but the sightings become more frequent, more real. And then one night, he saw it up close. It was late around 2 a.m. He was walking through the old dormitory building. The air was thick with the same oppressive feeling, like something was watching him. As he turned the corner, he saw it. A man standing at the end of the hallway, his back turned. My uncle called out, "Hey you, you're not supposed to be here." But the man didn't move. Slowly, the figure turned around, and my uncle's blood ran cold. It was my grandfather, or at least looked like him, but something was off. His eyes were hollow, dark, and empty, his face twisted into an expression of sorrow and pain in his face. My uncle froze, his heart pounding in his chest, unable to move or speak. "Leave," said the figure, its voice low and menacing. "Leave this place before it's too late." And just like that, the figure vanished. My uncle quit his shop the next day. To this day, he still refuses to talk about what happened on that campus. But late at night, when the wind hollows through the trees and the shadows grow long, we sometimes hear it. That faint, slow clapping echoing through the night, like the ghosts of those who never left. And every time we hear it, we know they're still there, waiting, watching. Some extra details I managed to find regarding the college's dark history. The campus was built on land that once had been the site of an old Shinto shrine, long since forgotten. According to local legends, the shrine was desecrated by a group of outsiders who mocked the gods and defiled sacred ground. The shrine's guardian spirit, angered by the disrespect, cursed the land. Those who disrespect the shrine or disturb its resting place are doomed to suffer an untimely fate, their spirits trapped, forever haunting the grounds. In the 1920s, before the fire had claimed the lives of the students, a series of strange accidents had plagued the campus. Several students went missing, their bodies never recovered, and faculty members reportedly seeing ghostly apparitions wander in the halls. The administration covered up the disappearances, fearing the bad publicity, but the curse persisted. Even today, students report seeing shadowy figures out of the corner of their eyes, or hearing disembodied voices calling their names. Some say that if you stand in front of the old dormitory at midnight, you can hear the faint sound of footsteps, followed by the smell of smoke and the sound of crackling flames. But when you turn to look, nothing's there. Only the spirits of the restless, forever trapped in the place they died, waiting for someone to join them in their eternal torment. Thanks for watching Real Spirit Horror Stories. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new upload. We've got plenty more terrifying stories coming your way, so stay tuned. And remember, the next time you hear something go bump in the night, it just might be more than your imagination. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.